I am Brad Keelor. He is Craig Benson. Coming up next on Director's Cut, you're going to find out the coldest day he's ever experienced. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut every single week, except 1 week at the holidays and a nice little break during the summer when I'm doing other things. I sit down with a different GI member who has stories to tell. Some are personal, some are professional, but all of them are fun. If you don't know anything about the Geo-Institute, after you watch this interview today, let your fingers carry you over to geoinstitute.org, and there you will find out many things about us, including that we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and that we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. If you like what you see today, and it's going to be good, everybody, you should click like, subscribe, and get notifications, and we'll let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. Coming to us from the depths of winter, well, kind of, because it's getting warm up there, in Madison, Wisconsin, and its environs, where he is. We got two job titles here, everybody. Wisconsin Distinguished Professor Emeritus at the University of Wisconsin, but Craig is also the Dean of Engineering Emeritus at the University of Virginia, down here just mere miles from the palatial Keelor Estate in Virginia. Craig, welcome, and thank you for doing this.
Oh, you bet. I'm glad to be here.
We're going to have an amazing time today. We've got 10 questions, the same way that we do every week. 2 of them are the same that we ask everybody, and tradition dictates that we start with one of those. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
Glad to do that. I don't work for anybody, which is fantastic. But people often ask me, what does it mean to be emeritus or something at a university? And I always tell them it's really simple. You get to work for free. You can do whatever you want, and you won't get paid. And jesting aside, I'm still involved in university things and research environment, and I'm also very much involved in practice as a specialty consultant. I work in my field with industry every single day, applying the things I've worked on throughout my career to real problems, helping industry solve these really thorny problems in their real projects. And it's a great way to apply things I did in research into the real world day in and day out. It's a blast.
Oh, I love that. I'm not sure. I would have to go back and look. I'm not sure anyone's ever defined emeritus before on the show. So that is fantastic. And we are going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through the interview and what it means for where you are now in your career. But first, we got to get to one of the fun questions. And this is the one we teased at the beginning. We get right to it right away. Craig, what's the coldest day you've ever experienced?
Oh, love to tell you this story. I'm a runner, and I like to run in extreme weather. I've run at 115 in the Central Valley, but the coldest day was about over a decade ago when we had the so-called polar vortex that came down from Canada. And it was about minus 25 when I left the house to go running. And I did go running that day. I bundled up and I went into the woods near my home and went down in the valley. And I had a thermometer with me so I could watch it the whole time. And it dropped down to minus 30 when I got at the low spot in that trek. And it was unbelievable. And it got a little painful too. My arm started to hurt, but I had so much fun. And it was beautiful, sunny, but really cold and completely snow covered. It was awesome experience.
So one thing that I did always like about running in the cold was that you're not going to run into a whole lot of people generally. There are a lot fewer than there would be on a warmer day. When I started running, I would not go out if it was below, and get your laugh ready here, 40 degrees. And that usually meant that I couldn't go out about 6 times a year that I was planning to, because it doesn't really get that cold down here. As I got older, I thought this is really stupid. Like, I can go out when it's colder than that. I just need to prepare for it. But even then, 20 degrees is about my max, Craig. What did you have to do to prepare during that polar vortex to I mean, you got to do something special, right? Because your sweat could freeze at 30 below, couldn't it?
Well, you don't sweat too much, but you got to wear lots of layers and you got to cover up a lot of your skin. So you got a
Okay.
baklava, you got a hat, you got big heavy mittens. And one of the other things that's really critical is you get the little hand warmers, those little pads that oxidize and get warm, and you put them in your gloves and you put them in your shoes. And then you just hope a little bit that you don't get stuck somewhere and get really, really cold.
Oh, that's fantastic. I like that. And I also love that you going down in the valleys, underrated. We have the W&OD trail near work. If you drop
Mhm.
down on the Cross County Trail, you get about 75 feet below the ridge, no wind. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. I love that. I mentioned that we were going to talk a little bit about this transition that you've experienced at the end of your career. The third question is always the research question. And you came up with this one, and this is amazing because we've never talked about this on the show before. I want to know, Craig, what's different about research at the end of your career?
Yeah. Yeah, this is an area that I have a lot of passion about. As an academic, you spend your career teaching students and conducting research. And a lot of your research, it kind of goes with where the opportunities are financially at the time. You have to do things that are funded, but otherwise they're hard to do. At the end of your career, you get to pick and choose. And I think one of the things you look at are where is kind of the unfinished business? Where are the things that you wanted to get something special out of it that so that it has lasting value? It's just not a paper, but so you can be able to finish it off in a way that other people can run with it and use it in practice. And so I'm actually right now, we have a large project out in the mountains of Idaho where we're building soil bentonite barriers for a mine closure. And we need to measure bentonite content in the mixture. We developed a technique to do this circa 1993 using electrical conductivity measurements. And then we never did anything with it. It was kind of an academic idea. Now I got an opportunity to put into practice, right? So we've been looking at it at full scale. How do we get this to a point where we could just use this for construction quality control on a day-to-day basis? And we're almost there. So we're taking it from this kind of cool idea to going into practice at full scale. And my plan is to write an ASTM standard on it once we get done with this at the end of next construction season, which would be a blast. But my research world is a lot like that. It's kind of wrapping up these things that so that you put a nice bow on them, right?
At what point do you feel like that change happened for you? Was it pretty close to the time you became emeritus, or did you notice it earlier on? I mean, I would also guess one of the big changes I would think is you probably can be a lot pickier about who you collaborate with as you get further in your career.
But your role changes. As a lot of your career, your research activity is driven partly by the research business, and it is a business. You have to have funding, you got to develop clients, you got to work that it's and later in life, when you're kind of winding things down, it's no longer a business. You're doing the things where you have your passion, right? The things that you really enjoy doing, but you never got to finish up. And that's what you do. And it's just fundamentally different approach. And you work with different people because it's not about a financial opportunity to get a project, but it's about, hey, we have common interest in making this reality so people can use it. And like this one on bentonite content, we've got this complex problem. We got to monitor bentonite content. What's the best way to do that quickly, accurately, and with confidence in the field? Well, this is going to work. It's going to be standardized by the time we're done. What a blast.
Which I hope is what everybody says when they get to the point you're at in your career. It better be fun, right? Otherwise, why are you doing it? I think.
Yeah. And it is fun. It's a blast.
So, as people watch this, we already talked about the coldest day you've ever experienced. We hit one winter question already. As we record and as they watch, we are in the throes of the 2026 Winter Olympic Games happening in Italy as we speak, I guess. They're still happening for the day.
Yep.
And so, Craig, I wanted to ask you, what Winter Olympic sport would you most want to compete in?
That's a no-brainer. Cross-country skiing. I love going out on my cross-country skis in the woods, in the snow. It's just fantastic. Of course, you're not in the woods in the snow when you're doing it in the Olympics, but close enough, right? It would be a blast. That experience is so much fun.
I want to ask you about biathlon because that is one of my faves in the Olympics every time. It's not really a sport that's in the mainstream otherwise, so that's my big chance to watch it. What do you think about biathlon? The combo of, that intense skiing and having to stop and hit a target precisely several times. That's one of my favorites. Do you enjoy it?
It's fascinating. Not something I could ever do. I got to do one thing and get it done, and then I got to transition into something else. But yeah, and it's amazing that people can do those things and do them both well, which is the cool part. And if you're Olympian, you're doing things well.
Well, you better be, right? Something went wrong if you're not. So we're going to get into some nostalgia questions in this part of the interview. And of course, that's what the meat and potatoes of Director's Cut is. The fun stuff, the nostalgia, we cover it all. I want to talk a little bit about your transition to administration. It's not for everybody, and it brings a lot of different roles and responsibilities into your life. When you look back on that transition for you, what was the most challenging part for you when you moved into those roles?
Yeah, great question. I wouldn't say there was anything that was a hurdle or a challenge. Because, and I don't look at it as administration per se. Universities have administrators. Those are people who wear ties and talk a lot. I look at it as leadership. And I've been in leadership roles my entire career at different levels. So it's always a natural transition to go from one to the next level, to the next level, to the next level. But going into at the higher levels of leadership, I would say the biggest challenges are two. And this is whether you're a department chair, or a dean, or a provost, or a president. One is you just have less time that's available to you to define, right? Somebody else is scheduling every minute of your day. You got your EA, who's got your calendar, who schedules every minute of your day. And then the other part, so one is just your ability to kind of pick and choose what you want to do during the day, which is a professor. That's all you do. It's a blast. You don't get to do that in senior leadership. Somebody else is doing that for you. The other part is privacy. You really, particularly when you're a dean or at a higher level than that, your life is an open book. People are always looking at you, and you don't have really a moment where you can say, this is just my private time. Certainly at UVA, we lived right on campus in our home. So people are walking by at our home, right? And you lose privacy, and that's a hard thing to get used to, but well worth it. But those jobs, all those leadership jobs, were just fantastic.
Even with the privacy, that's a really interesting way to put it, because I think of it a little bit differently, I guess, because there are people who are just out there from day one, and that's the way they live their lives. I think when you start going up the chain, more people care about what you're doing.
Yep.
You're no longer just totally anonymous going out there doing your thing. Oh, that's a really good answer. I like that. But you know what? I gotta point this out again. It sounds like you don't make it sound like you didn't enjoy it. It sounds like you really got something valuable out of that at every step of the way.
Oh yeah. The leadership roles are an opportunity to not only for yourself, but for everybody else in your organization to lift people up. And there's nothing more rewarding to take an organization and lift it up and the people in it, provide them with opportunity in their life. It doesn't get any better than that. My last leadership job at UVA was the best job I ever had. I had such a blast, and I enjoyed it immensely.
Now we go a little bit farther back. for more nostalgia. And this is the other question we ask everybody when they come on the show, and it's to think about how they got involved initially with ASCE and GI. And we call this the origin story. Craig, how did you first get involved with ASCE and then GI?
Yeah. Like many, I got involved with ASCE as an undergraduate student, the student chapter at Lehigh University when I was an undergraduate in the early 80s. Working in Jeff Evans' lab in Chandler Ullman Hall. Jeff's a GI member and a professor emeritus at Bucknell. I was in the student chapter and involved with that at the time. And then I went to graduate school at UT Austin, and all the faculty there were very much involved with, at that time, with what was called the geotechnical engineering division before the GI. And it was a natural, because that was the community of practice was the geotechnical engineering division. And so naturally you migrated into that community through that graduate school experience. And I was in that before I was in GI, right? It was the geotechnical engineering division. And then in the early 90s, I got invited to participate in these formative discussions we had in Reston about this new idea about creating this thing called the Geo-Institute. What's that going to be? And part of it was to create something that wasn't just a division within ASCE, but something that had its own identity, its own future, that embraced both ASCE, but also the passions of the membership around their particular discipline area. That experience was just fantastic. We all these planning meetings, dreaming up what the GI could be, lots of arguments about it, lots of issues about how we could actually implement it and get everybody on board. But we did, as you can tell, 30 years now. Fantastic.
And we are going to talk a little bit more about that later on in the interview too. And you've got a great story for us. I think I really feel sad sometimes that I missed out on all the marketing opportunities that came along with having GED as an acronym. So I'm a little sad about that, but we do our best with GI as well. And more nostalgia for you, Craig. This is unbelievable. I kind of stacked it up for you here as we go through this. We're about to hit our 30th anniversary Geo-Congress in a few weeks. We're going to be in Salt Lake City. And for everybody who remembers, the first one was in 1997 in Logan, Utah, on the campus at Utah State. We're not going to Logan this time. There's an international airport right near where we're going to have the event. So no caravan out of the city for this one. But I wanted to ask you, and no pressure, it doesn't have to be a GI one, but on which conference that you attended do you look back the most fondly?
Well, and I think it's in GI conferences, and I think that's where I pick it. It was the Geo-Congress in 2012. I had the opportunity to give the PEC lecture at that conference. And I think we had 4 different papers in the proceedings. We're a very active group with lots of things going on. But we had been working on understanding this field behavior of geosynthetic clay liners. I had these interesting case histories where failures had occurred, and I was figuring all this new stuff out. And it was very much kind of in the PEC's mindset of understanding how things work in the field and practical application. And it was just wonderful to have this opportunity to present to the GI more broadly all of what we had learned about how these materials function and what were the things that we really had to pay attention to that could be potential pitfalls. We had been developing this for 5-6 years, and there it was. What an opportunity. I had such a blast giving that lecture. And of course, the other thing that's always great about all these conferences, it's the people. Right? You're seeing people that you've worked with in different ways throughout the years. That's always the best part.
Do you remember the phone call? I'm guessing it was a phone call when you found out that you'd been awarded the PEC lecture that year, and what happened mentally and physically for you when you found that out?
I don't remember that in particular, but it just felt good because I have a PEC lineage in my academic tree, And it was just pretty cool to come down that path and, to kind of have an opportunity to honor that heritage of where you came from in the context of the way Ralph Peck did things. It was a wonderful opportunity, and I just thought, wow, this is cool. Who gets to do this?
More nostalgia for you. Shortly after that, you were, of course, the president of the Geo-Institute. You're one of our now, I guess we have 29 past presidents. We don't have 30
Wow.
yet, but you're one of the crew. And I wanted to ask you, we talked about this a little bit before we hit record. That's now almost 15 years ago, even though it doesn't really feel like it. What's the biggest change that you've noticed in GI since your term as president?
One of the things I've noticed is how the GI at the time when I was president, it was still kind of evolving. We had developed it in the decade before, kind of essentially put it on paper, right? And we were, I think, at the first time really developing a strategic plan about our future when I was president. And today it's an institution. It was evolving when I was president. Around that time, it was kind of becoming what it was going to be. And today it's an institution. I mean, it is geotechnical engineering, and that's pretty cool. It is the place to be as a geotechnical engineer for professional society. Wonderful to have that home. It's very professional. It has activities that are consistent year in and year out. Great journals and publications. Just fantastic.
I think we're very proud of that. One thing we hear a lot from the rest of ASCE is always that, well, GI is so lucky because for your members, GI is their number one activity. And for many of the other institutes, ASCE is a secondary involvement for them. And I think, yeah, maybe we're lucky, but if we weren't giving people what they wanted out of that involvement, they would find something else. So
Precisely.
we must be doing okay. Oh, that's fantastic. And I swear to you, I didn't mean to put together all these nostalgia questions back to back to back to back to back. They just all kind of became that way. I love that you used the word evolve in your last answer because that's a great segue into what comes next here. You are, to a lot of people, geo-environmental guy, Craig Benson. You're, of course, known for your sustainability research, too. And for those of us who have now been around a long time, you can remember the days when sustainability research wasn't, I don't want to say not as mainstream, but it was not what it is now. It doesn't matter what discipline you were in. It was kind of over here. And then I think it was maybe 2009 that NSF had put together the SEAS program. It was like $1 billion cross directorate program. And that's when things kind of became major league, right? Craig, I'm hoping you can tell the people some tales about the early days of sustainability research.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about this. I got into this area as one of my areas of research back before we called it sustainability, and we were looking at my colleague Tuncer Edel, we've worked together for years and years. We were looking at ways that we could reuse industrial byproducts in geotechnical construction. Right? How could we take these things that were waste products and getting thrown into the landfill, and rather than putting them in a landfill, how can we use them because many of them are like earthen materials. And so we were exploring different ways to do that, partly because, I'll be candid with you, it was just an opportunity out there. We could get projects in it, it had to add value to society. So we got on board and went down that path, did all kinds of neat things. And so it was really about beneficial reuse and recycling. And we got really lucky and won a federal contract to run the Recycled Materials Resource Center, which is essentially a research enterprise to support activities of the states around using industrial byproducts in infrastructure construction. So really at the beginning, it wasn't called sustainability. I remember I went to one meeting And somebody said that word sustainability. I'm saying, what does that mean? What is this? What are they talking about sustainability? I said, I don't know, but it sounds good. I'll use it in one of my talks. And and then I gave a talk and I embedded sustainability in it because I had something to do with recycling, and it just resonated with everybody. And I thought, okay, now I'm a sustainability person as opposed to an industrial byproducts person. But we went down that path, and it turned out to be a area full of opportunity. One of my roles at Wisconsin was director of sustainability research and education for the entire campus. And as part of kind of this broader ethos in Wisconsin about being good stewards of our world and our resources, it was just a major focus of the university. So not only was I doing things in geotechnical engineering, I was doing things throughout the entire campus with people in the in the vet school, with people in medicine, with people in the arts and sciences. It was just fantastic going down that path. Today, of course, we're struggling a little bit with sustainability. Supposedly, it's not quite so good to do anymore. Who knows? I still think it's important. We care about our world.
So, since those days, I mean, we could make a whole long list of the changes societally or technically or scientifically, whatever you want to classify them as, whether it's big data, whether it's advances in materials, just a broader field of knowledge, whatever it is. I mean, what we talked about one of those projects earlier that you kind of came back to because you could later on. Is there anything else that you can think of? I mean, something that you never would have dreamed of that you could do in 2026 in the sustainability field that you couldn't have done earlier in your career?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we have today that we certainly didn't have when I was 30 years ago, and we were in the middle of all that, is computing power that's through the roof, right? We would write Excel spreadsheets in Fortran codes. Can you believe Fortran? And so our ability to do compute and to do analysis was, it was prehistoric. Today, we have incredibly powerful tools on our phones, right? And to be able to put large volumes of data together and interpret that just would enable you to do things in the sustainability space that you couldn't have imagined before, which I see as a great opportunity for the next gen.
I think also getting to the point where, not that programming is not or coding is not a badge of honor anymore. But I think when you look at languages like Python or Ruby, when they first came out, they were looked at really dismissively by a lot of the computer science community because they were easy. And I feel like as a scientific and research community, we've kind of gotten past that now, and they get a little bit more respect because you can do pretty cool stuff with those languages too. And sometimes that's all you need. And I feel like that's been a huge benefit to the community.
Couldn't agree more.
One more nostalgia one for you. We're going to wrap with this. I wanted to ask a Geo Legends question. And, you mentioned earlier that you were there in the room for a lot of those discussions for the creation of the Geo-Institute when we moved over, when the Geotechnical Engineering Division became GI in the mid-90s. Craig, as you look back on all these things and everything else in your career too, what are your all-time favorite Geo Legends stories?
Well, there's a couple of Geo Legends interviews that I really admire. One of those is about Bill Marcuson. Bill was at the Corps of Engineers Waterways Experiment Station throughout his career. And Bill was just this a fantastic mentor to me, a person I still today think back of the things that Bill taught me in the early 90s at those formative meetings that we had to imagine what the GI could be. Bill was there, I was there, and others were there. I was running meetings that formative discussion, and what I learned are created from things that Bill told me, what I call the rules of Marcuson, about how to organize yourself strategically and how to organize groups to be successful in meetings like that. Bill was a fantastic mentor for me. not in geotech, but about managing my own time, about leadership, about how to get organizations to move in a particular direction. And I use things that Bill taught me in the early 90s today. That's one that I really admire. Another one is about another person I really admire as well, and that's Rudy Bonaparte. I use the equations that Rudy and J.P. Giroux developed almost 40 years ago, really now. I still use them, right? And I use the recommendations that I had in their papers. I actually pulled out one of their papers from the 80s the other day and used it. But what I really appreciate about Rudy is he was just really strong fundamentally. He had has the skills of a research professor in the scientific side of it, and the acumen of a business person who developed perhaps one of the best geotechnical companies in the world. And being able to live in both of those spaces and then be such a gentleman at the same time is just a remarkable attribute. So that's the things I see in his GeoLegend stories, is essentially his history of his career. And to me, he's something we should all aspire to be.
So I want to ask you a question that's maybe targeted at some of the younger viewers of Director's Cut. When do you know that you've become a peer to these people who have served as mentors or been legends to you throughout your life? I mean, I think everybody has to kind of grapple with that moment. I had a professor in undergrad who I later worked with on some research, and it was hard for me because I still viewed him as, and even though he was probably about 12 years older than I was, I still viewed him as professor, you know, this older guy with a lot more experience. I was not on the same plane as him. And he said this jokingly, but at one point he was like, if you don't start calling me by my first name, he's like, this is it. How do you know when you've hit that point, when you're a peer to these people?
Well, part of it, you look at the color of your hair, right? I don't think there's an indicator, but there is a sense about the way you talk with people, and actually the way they talk with you, right? And are they asking you questions and what you think, and asking your advice on things, as opposed to talking to you as a staff member, right? And I think that's really where you begin to get a sense that you're a peer, is when people really start to treat you like one of their own. But there's, in my experience, there's been no magical time when that occurs, and there's still people that I don't feel peers to, you know, that are just, they're legends, right? And they always will be, and they'll be up on that pedestal.
Oh, that is fantastic. Craig, you made it through all 10 questions, and you did so with aplomb. There was never a doubt that you were going to make it through these in such spectacular fashion. We learned a lot today, and maybe we'll catch you cross-country skiing or running in 30 below weather or something like that at some point. For our viewers, if you liked what you saw, and I always say you probably did because you're here at the end, again, click like, subscribe, and get notifications. And if you do those things, we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. Craig, thank you so much for doing this. I hope it was a good time.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for inviting me. Very grateful.
And I always make sure I ask as a leading question so that people say it was a good time. You don't want to get a negative there. But again, for all of our viewers out there, we will see you in just 7 short days with another brand new episode of Director's Cut.